if my husband calls me because he's out of town.
Got it.
And he might need a ride, but I don't think I'll have to.
Okay, so this week we looked at Bronfenbrenner's model, ecological approach, and then we also looked at the resources about redefining marriage. So kind of like what we've done in the past weeks, let's just go around. Oh, sorry for that cute little cry. Let's just go around and say like what from the resources we read stuck out to us the most, like what kind of insights did we gain? And let's see, I'll just pick some random. Valerie, do you want to start?
Okay, so one thing I found interesting is my reading for all my classes has kind of blended together so well this week. The socializing of the child was interesting. I think what I liked the best in the first half of the reading this week was the advocating and promoting and defending light rather than attacking and deconstructing darkness. And as I was reading this, my sister, she had called me kind of upset. Her daughter's going to move in with her boyfriend and she didn't know how to approach the situation. And I'm like, she's confrontational, her daughter is. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, she really just needs to be non-confrontational and just say, well, you know how I feel about it, and leave it at that. So I just felt really good about being able to help her, you know, and I was going over the scriptures that we were talking about. So she's like, oh, you know, answer to her prayer on that. And I really liked the video. What's her name? Kelly. I wrote it down somewhere. I really liked.
I think it's Houghton.
Anyway. Yeah. I really liked that video. Let's see. I liked how, you know, she talked about we have to protect children's rights. She really helped explain the what the CRC says and the themes. You know, she really helped because I was reading it. I'm like, okay, this is going in one ear and out the other, but she helped me understand better. And like she said, how the writing is, it makes it sound like it's good. And when I was first reading, I'm like, well, why would we be against this? But then how she said they twist the wording. So where is it? I can't even read my notes. So their deception, like reproduction rights, which, you know, I would naturally think, wow, reproduction rights. Yeah, we have the right to reproduce, have families. But their wording, it actually means abortion. You know, and to have an abortion whenever a woman wants to, that's wrong. I never really agree with abortion. So, and then how the UN want all mothers to work, and how they want everyone to put their children in daycare and just work. You know, so it really helped shed light to me, that video.
Awesome. Yeah, side note, when she showed the picture of her family, her son looks really familiar to me, and I couldn't figure out if I knew him or not. And then she said she was from Arizona, and I still haven't figured it out, but I'm pretty sure I know her son. But I really liked that video too. And I agree. It was interesting to see all of the different definitions that fall behind phrases like that, reproductive rights, and what that actually means. Okay, how about Tiara? Do you want to go next?
Yes. I started talking and I couldn't get the microphone to work. So I also really liked the thing from Elder Hales talking about the need to defend light rather than attack darkness at the beginning of the week. And I think that really helped help us get in the mindset for the different readings we were having. So rather than just I don't know, we were able to see both sides, but we were able to see them both really logically, so that we were able to make the best decisions of how we stand with the different policies that were brought up. I really liked the reading in the Ryan Anderson book. And I don't know if you guys watched the video where he was talking to the gay guy that came to his lecture.
Yes, totally.
And yeah, and he too twisted the words, just like Valerie was saying, he's saying he's standing for civil rights, but really he's just asking about his own personal case of wanting same-sex marriage, when really he doesn't care about equality for all marriage types. So I thought that was interesting that both Anderson's things that are that's more closer to home than the UN is, I think, just because I don't know, it's that was at BYU Idaho, whereas the other thing is over at the UN. So I just thought it was interesting that the way we interpret the words of people we're debating with, it can change everything. So we have to really understand and redefine when we're talking to people what they're saying, so that we know their true stance, if that makes sense. So
yeah, Ryan Anderson was my favorite part of the studying this week as well. But anyway, I'll share that later. Oh, and was the second video at BYU Idaho?
I thought so. Maybe it wasn't.
I was surprised because it looked like an older crowd, so I wasn't sure, and I couldn't recognize the venue, but who knows?
Well, maybe it wasn't, but still, it was in the U.S. So
yes, you're right.
Closer to.
Okay, Jeannie, will you go next?
Yep. Okay, so I also just kind of echo what you guys have already said. I really liked that it started with the light and darkness, with kind of, because I do think that set the stage of everything. Kelly's video I loved because it helped me see, because there's this greater thing out there, but sometimes, especially when you're very focused in momdom, it's easy to get focused on your immediate sphere and not really pay attention to what's happening, even though maybe I read the news and I listen to talk radio sometimes when I'm in between audiobooks, and I feel like I know, but listening to her speak and talk about the way that the UN is sneaking stuff in, and it really kind of opened my eyes about how I maybe should pay more attention and be more involved, because those are big issues. They matter to us as moms, especially. I know that Jamie homeschool. No, is there somebody in this group that homeschools? Maybe it's my other group. And I homeschooled my kids. They just I homeschool one right now. The others are in a charter school now, but I live in a very sad school district. But going through that, homeschooling, you kind of come to recognize the forces that are at play to try to kind of take some of those rights away from parents. So this week for me, the things that stood out were really kind of the undermining attack on the family, the way the words mean something. And I think we read in the scriptures a lot about, you know, the twisting of the words. You know, we're in Alma right now in our family scripture study, and that comes up often whenever there's, you know, they use the words and they try to twist them. You know, the judges and the lawyers are constantly trying to twist the words of the prophets, and it feels like that's what's happening a lot, and that's what kept coming to mind for me. I really liked Ryan Anderson's one video was pretty much the information that he gave in his book, but I enjoyed watching it because I think I noticed different things as he was speaking than when I was, you know, reading the book. And it was just kind of nice to kind of put his mannerisms, his, you know, face with the reading. So I liked that. He's very inspiring to me because he has such a wonderful way of putting things in a logical argument without getting emotional or without having to bring religion into it. And that seems like a real gift to be able to get to that place where you can talk about something that means so much to you in that way. So that's what stood out to me.
Love it. Yeah, something that you said reminded me, I also kind of had like a similar revelation with what the attack on the family actually looked like, because I'll be 100% honest, like, because I'm only 25, I feel like I've been hearing that the family has been under attack my whole life. And I just thought this is something that the prophets have probably been saying since Joseph Smith. But this week it really hit home that actually that's not really true, you know. And even my mom talked to me about what her life was like growing up, and well, actually, you know what, in her own way, her family was a little bit under attack because my mom had 5 kids, and that just wasn't the norm because she wasn't LDS, and so people always assumed she was Catholic, and they'd say 5 kids, that's just way too many. You're going to drive yourself into debt or whatever. So I guess the family has been under attack, but in really, really subtle ways. And now, like, the degree of how it's under attack compared to what it has been over centuries is different. So yeah, I liked that you shared that. It reminded me of something I learned. Okay, so Jamie.
So one of the things that stood out to me the most was also from Kelly. How is it Houghton? Anyway, from her presentation, when she put up on the screen President Kimball's like list of what the enemy does to which we know who the real enemy is, right? It's Satan that is behind all of this work, because his work is to destroy the family. And so everyone who engages in that work is literally like engaging in, their hands are doing Satan's work on the earth. Just like, you know, we learn about that we're the Savior's hands and we need to be doing his work. This opposite side is doing Satan's work of destroying the family. But I loved Spencer W. Kimball's list that Kelly shared, where it was, first, they use logic to confuse, rationalization to destroy, they shade meanings, open doors one inch at a time, and then lead us from the purest white through the shades of gray to the darkest black. And like Terry was saying, I feel like we've heard this like our whole lives. I was a freshman in college because I'm 40. So I was a freshman in college when the family proclamation came out, and I was like, yeah, the family's under attack. That's what they always say, sort of thing. And I guess part of me was trying to like not be scared by it all, and I was like, I just want to look around and like remember that people do still believe in marriage and that families are important, and that this is a small minority voice that is, you know, trying to push all these things through. And over the years, as I got married and started having children, and now my children are in school, and hearing all the things that they teach them and talk about at school, and they're coming home and saying, yeah, we watched a video today about how the earth is overcrowded and they're trying to control population. And I was like, why are you watching that in science? What does that have to do with anything? And why is your teacher showing you that? And anyway, So I've realized what this attack on the family really looks like, what we're actually facing and what we're actually dealing with. And Kelly talked about too that the things that are happening in the UN are a few years ahead of when we actually see it, when it kind of trickles down to like communities and neighborhoods. I mean, it like starts at that international level, and then it comes down into like, you know, national laws, and our legislature and the states start seeing it in their governing. But it takes a few years to like get down to us, to where we're facing the consequences of it. And this one, with this, especially with the CRC, to me, I was like, whoa, this, by the time it gets to us, it's going to be way too late. By the time that the like average family member, average American wife or husband or mother or father, or by the time we're hearing about it, it will be because it has been ratified. It will be because we're already starting to see the consequences of it. And so I thought, okay, what can I reasonably do? Right now, I have little kids at home. It's not like I'm going to travel to the UN and start. That's not something that I could do yet. But I started thinking, what can we reasonably do, and how can we take this small group of us that are in our class and start branching out and affecting the people that are in our direct contact, you know, our direct lines of contact, our immediate families, our friend circles, our ward members, our stakes. You know, what are the things that we can do to not, I don't want to like cause panic or be this heretic who stands up and says, don't you know what's going on? Can't you see? You know, but to really effectively advocate. And so I loved, you know, that diagram that we had that was like family advocacy, and it says like, it was the rings with what we need to bring together to be able to be strong advocates. That was really meaningful to me to see all of the different areas, and because I look at it as a progressive thing for me. Like, I can start with social media, I can start with strong coalitions.
That's the one.
No, not that one.
No, not that one.
Here, I drew a little picture of it. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that? And it was color coded. Yeah, that one, Valerie.
It's black and white. Oh, it's showing it backwards too.
How, you know, we can start on certain platforms, and then we can continue to support and strengthen the other areas by the things that we do. But I started thinking, really, we've got to get the word out. So anyway, that was my biggest takeaway is, okay, what can I do now, and how can I start building people around me to have understanding and to move forward with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and actually one of the questions that I have later is about what systems we can influence and what we're going to do. But before we get there, I wanted to share my favorite insight was, it was from Ryan Anderson's chapter and video. And yeah, I agree with Jeannie. I love watching videos way more than reading. It was like after I saw the video, I was like, was that what I just read? I don't really, okay, yeah. So in his address, first of all, I loved how he just started off by saying, these are the things I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about morality. I'm not going to talk about theology. And I can't remember the third thing. Tradition. And I was just so glad that he got that out of the way. Not because those arguments don't matter, but just because I think if there were someone, a skeptic in the crowd that said, oh, here we go, he's going to talk about the importance of morality, it would have grabbed their attention. And so in his argument, what I loved the most was when he talked about, oh, darn it, it just slipped my mind. Well, let me go on a different thought. Okay, different thought. How you guys were mentioning Elder Hales and how it's more important to strengthen light than to attack darkness. That so I did my internship last semester because I wanted to get it done before having my cute little baby. And I did it at the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake. and it's a conservative think tank. And honestly, I have absolutely no interest in public policy, and I had no idea how it worked. And from what I heard about the Sutherland Institute, not a ton of people loved it, especially if they weren't conservative. A lot of people actually really didn't like it. But I thought, you know what? It's a pretty distinguished internship. It's paid. That's all I really want. So I went to work there, and I was really impressed by how it runs. It's like kind of small. There's only about 15 employees. And the president at the time, he just left. His name was Boyd Matheson. He like took a really vested interest in teaching everyone there, and everyone kind of had the same mindset of Elder Hales, where it's more important to teach principles and to trace back to good conservative principles than it is to just fight the opposing viewpoints. And so that was kind of my biggest takeaway from that internship. And so it was cool to see it reinforced by Elder Hales. Okay, and so back to Ryan Anderson. I loved how he came up with a super clear definition of marriage. And I loved how he was not afraid to call things not marriage. So like when he was talking to that gay guy in the Q&A, that was like an interesting interchange, because I felt like the questioner didn't really understand where he was going with his answer. And I don't know. So if you guys don't, I'm going to summarize it. So this guy said, okay, so my question is, as a homosexual man, how come I cannot file jointly on my taxes? How is that not discrimination? And so then Ryan Anderson goes to answer it, and he says, well, let me ask you this. Would you want the same rights for a throuple, or whatever the 4-person relationship is called? And the man who asked the question, said, well, no, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, how come I, as a homosexual man, can't file my taxes jointly? And he says, no, I understand, but I'm just trying to figure out what principle you're operating on, because if you think that you should get a tax break, then you should also think that a throuple and a 4-person relationship should get a tax break. And so then that's when he says, well, I'm operating on the principle of civil rights. And so it was interesting, because there was a miscommunication until finally he said, I'm a gay man and I can't get the same tax. And Ryan just really clearly says, because you're not married. And he said, but I could be in California. He said, no, because that's not marriage. So I was really impressed. And it was funny. My husband was overhearing this video, and he said, oh, he's kind of like a less snarky version of Ben Shapiro. I don't know if you guys have seen Ben Shapiro, but I was like, yeah, actually. And I think his personal mission is for marriage. But I was just really impressed that he just calls it what it is. And he said, you have the option to get married, but you're choosing not to. To me, it sounds like you're more interested in a same-sex relationship than you are in marriage. And so I think right there was just exactly what I needed to hear, where, because my opinion before reading his definition of marriage was kind of like, well, I know what marriage is. I know what God thinks marriage is. And anyone else can just have whatever relationship they want, but I know what a real marriage is. But I can see the importance of how keeping the word marriage, what it actually is important. Because, oh, and I remember what I was going to say before. I loved how he talked about how the crowning event of a marriage is procreation, and how that's kind of even what the definition of marriage is built on. Because if you think about it, like the things that he taught are really what are going to save the next generation. Like Jonathan and I were just talking the other day about how on the news he heard about a woman who was not able to conceive children herself or something, and she was single, and so she got a sperm donor and an egg donor. And so she was basically a surrogate for what will be her own child. And my husband said, like, well, that child is going to be very confused. And I thought, yeah, that would be confusing, to come into the world, to be raised by a woman by herself who isn't biologically related to you at all, and there is a power of carrying a child, but still. Anyway, so I was just thinking, like giving children the best shot that we can give them is really what should drive public policy. And so then finally, I'm talking a lot, but my favorite thing that he said was why government should be in the business of marriage. Because for a long time, I thought they shouldn't. You know, why is the government telling people what is and what isn't, especially in religious matters? Because I always thought marriage was a religious matter. But the way that Ben Anderson describes it is marriage is actually a very important part of our government, because if our government is supposed to, you know, protect our rights and provide where we lack, I guess, if that's what your view of government is, then they have a vested interest in how the people turn out. And people turn out good when they have a mother and a father. And so I love how he laid out that argument and explained that government has a very, very vested interest in how we turn out. And then also, I love at the end when my favorite line is when he says, and people always ask, well, what about the infertile couple? And he says, there's a football team who never wins. Are they still considered a football team? So that made me laugh. Anyway, so those are my favorite tidbits from the reading. So now I want to kind of talk about what Jamie touched on, and that's the ecological systems that are around us. So we have the microsystems, you know, the people and the things that we directly interact with. And then we've got the mesosystems, like how those things around us interact with each other. And then farther out. So after doing this reading, like what kind of inspiration did you guys gain, and what kind of systems do you feel like you can influence now or later, or like, I guess in a weird way, what's your plan of attack? And anyone can answer. So
I think for me, my plan of attack right now is the microsystem. Teach my children and my grandchild that I'm going to have in 7 months, and people that I come in contact locally at church, in the community, school, peers. Most of my friends are all members of the church, but even at that, we still have to shed light and share with them what we're learning, especially with on marriage, and how, you know, a lot of people are turning to the same idea that, well, it doesn't matter, you know, but it does matter. And just teaching them why it matters and why we have to protect our children. I think that's important.
I think for me, I am more inspired to get outside of my circle. And maybe it's because I'm sort of at a life crossroads. My oldest is graduating and my youngest is going to be starting kindergarten. And so, and I'm going to be finishing school, and I'm a serious workaholic, which is probably why I homeschooled my kids when I became a stay-at-home mom, because I have to constantly have more on my plate than I can handle. So I will probably build on kind of what Valerie just said, and try to find out what I can do in my community, how I can be involved on kind of that bigger scale, and see, you know, what I can do to make a difference there. But I think even if working at that, it's still those conversations, even with people that you think, you know, believe the same you do, the ladies that are sitting next to you in a Relief Society that you assume kind of see it all. I mean, if you look at how much just in the past 4.5 weeks, our perspective has changed on the approach, and, you know, what we've learned, you can see how much education is needed to help people understand why the prophets and apostles are talking about religious freedom, and why they're talking about the family, and why these issues are coming up repeatedly it's not because things are going to get better with everybody just, you know, ignoring the issues and feeling like they're going to go away. So that's kind of where I am.
I liked what Jeannie said about, well, really everything, but especially when I was watching Kelly's video, I mean, I loved everything that Ryan Anderson said, and I felt like he gave us some more tools, because we need the right verbiage to be able to have an effect on people. We need to have the right understanding of what's going on, but also to be able to explain it and articulate the importance of why this matters, instead of, because I was sort of like Terry, like, you know, I know the definition of marriage. I have complete confidence in our church leaders that they will advocate and that they will be in the public forum and supporting, you know, legislation that protects us. But this, especially listening to Ryan Anderson's video and after reading his book, the more that I read about it, the more that I think it's time for everyone to get involved. It's time for us to all join in the fight, so to speak. Sort of like Moroni, and we've talked about the title of liberty and what that looks like. We've got to be doing, you know, building the fortresses around our families and our homes, like he did there, throwing up heaps of earth and building the pickets and the towers, the watchtowers, and being prepared. But we've also, it's time for us to carry the title of liberty and to really get out there. So when Kelly was talking about the systems, the micro and the meso and the macro, and the example that she shared about going to Costa Vida and seeing that video playing over their screen, and the simple thing that she did, I think can really affect it. It's a way that we can right now reach into all of the systems. You know, we have our micro where we're teaching our kids and we're helping them understand, and we're, you know, like I said before, connecting with the people that are close to us. And with the meso system, you know, that continues out into our neighborhoods and our schools and our extended family. And but I think we can still have even a stay-at-home mom who's doing it from the comfort of our own home, that we can still engage at that macro level. And I think it's totally an individual thing where we ask Heavenly Father, okay, I'm willing. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And, you know, maybe it will surprise us what he says. Maybe he'll say, open your eyes. Every time you go to the store, every time you go to a restaurant, look around and speak out against anti-family messages. Speak out against, you know, which anti-family is pornography. Anti-family is, you know, it's all of those things. Immodesty. It's not just same-sex marriage. It's, I mean, there's a wide variety of messages. But I think if we are asking for those opportunities, just like with missionary work, that they'll be presented in front of us. And if we're willing to act on them, the Heavenly Father will bless us with the strength and the courage to do so. And that, when we were learning about the systems, that was my biggest takeaway from it, was this is like 1 Nephi 3:7 all over again. I will go and do, because I know that the Lord will bless me. And if we are asking for those opportunities, as advocates, knowing what we know now, that Heavenly Father will put them in our path, and we will be able to start just branching out and having this effect like Kelly has had. And, you know, maybe it won't take us to the UN, but maybe some people it will. And we'll be able to do what we can here to carry that title of liberty.
Does anyone have anything else they wanted to add?
I was just gonna say, like, a lot of the same things Jamie did. I really like the Costa Vida story too. I I always assume, like, sometimes when I'll go out in public and like something's like anti-family, like I'll complain about it and I'll be angry, but I don't do anything about it because I think that it's not going to change anything. So it was really cool that that actually like worked out in like our team's favor, if that makes sense, you know, that she was like able to make a difference. Um, with the microsystem, like working with your children and like your immediate family, we're having our first baby in a few weeks. So I guess like this is a question you guys can address, but like with teaching your children to like be for traditional marriage, like of course you teach them through example and like talk about the blessings of it and talk about how it's like ordained of God and everything. But how do you like teach them to be tolerant of other people so that like they have the same ideas that you do, but they're still being respectful? Because children can be very honest. So I'm worried that I won't know how to like, I don't know. My husband and I, we talk about our political views and our ideas about gay marriage and things like that all the time. But like when kids come into the house, like it's going to be different because I don't want them to go like condemn their friends on the playground. You know what I mean? So I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
I think that because you're thinking about it already means you're going to be as successful as you can be. Because I think you teach that through example too. You know, I've got my a couple of nephews that are gay, and I think my daughters first when my nephew Justin came out, they were really sad, and I think they were watching me to see how I was going to respond. And when I just continued to love Justin and, you know, continued to invite him over to, you know, give my daughter trumpet lessons, and nothing in the relationship changed, that they learned that that's how they should treat him, that they should still love him. And then we have those discussions in our home about, you know, right or wrong, and about what the Lord wants for us and our divine nature, and how, you know, we can love Justin without agreeing with his choice. And I think that Tiara, you're going to be a great mom because you're already thinking about how you're going to handle those things. It's just going to be through the example you're already setting.
Yes. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to add before I move on to something else? Okay. Oh my gosh, I've been losing my train of thought so often. Oh, yeah, I was going to respond myself to something that Jamie said. So in talking about, you know, I will go and do that. That's such a true principle that like when you're prepared, opportunities come up. And it's kind of your job to show up and just do what you've been prepared to do. And that's like another thing that I learned from my internship. The president talked about in his own life. He taught me this little pattern of like, if you're constantly preparing for something, it's amazing that it will happen. And I said, well, can you give me an example? And he talked about like in his own life, he went to BYU for like one semester and then he dropped out because he was more interested in business consulting and he didn't think he needed a degree for that. And so he just like started studying consulting on his own. And then sure enough, like he heard of this really famous guy who needed help coming up with a curriculum. And so he showed up and he was like 21 years old and he ended up getting this crazy job. So anyway, and that's the same with gospel related truths. It's like, and I always find this, you know, if you study your scriptures one day and you learn a principle, all of a sudden you see that principle in action the next day. And even like in elementary school, I'd learn a new vocab word and all of a sudden I'd hear that vocab word the next day because you just don't realize like how often these things happen around you until you know them. And so I'm glad that we're taking this class because it's helping me understand like the right things to say, the right arguments to present. the right principles to remember and be built upon, so that when a moment does come up, you know, someone does say something that I can help advocate for the family for, and I will know what to say. So that's really helpful. Okay, so different question, and this one came from the lesson. I just really liked it. So out of curiosity, like, what kind of events in history do you guys think have contributed to the disintegration of the family? So like Ben Anderson talked about no-fault divorce, which and I'm sure you guys have taken like family, I can't remember what number it is, but family relations, and we talk about no-fault divorce. So what other events in history do you guys think have had a significant impact on the family?
I think the women's rights movement has had a significant impact, because between the no-fault divorce and divorces and women wanting equal rights and wanting to, I mean, I see where some is good. I mean, a woman out there working should have the same pay as a man if she's doing the same job, but do we need to try and be the man? Why can't we just be women and love ourselves for who we are, you know? I just think that the women's movement has affected the family.
I totally agree with Valerie. I think what they were trying to do, just like we're seeing with the CRC, what they were trying to do was to give women equal opportunities. But what ended up happening is that they have devalued the role of a mother and of a wife and the work that we do within the walls of our home. And so, yeah, I totally agree that equal rights movement, to me, it's the same thing. There's a lot of good coupled with things that we don't want in there.
It's like all the policies in the government, they float in the bad that we don't want to get it passed along with what we actually do want. And that's the bad thing with our government. There's so much corruption.
I thought of one. This might be kind of a stretch, but I thought like that war probably had some sort of impact on the family. And if I had to guess, I would think that like maybe the attitude of fatherlessness kind of branched off from war, like the fact that families could go on without a father there. And I could be totally wrong. I'll probably meet someone whose father was at war and they'd say, "Are you kidding me? Like, we missed our dad every day." But I just think that maybe this attitude of like, you know, men can be off doing work and the family just goes on without them, and there's no harm, no foul. But in reality, like having a dad gone at war is a big deal. Having a dad die in war, that's a whole other thing. If a dad actually passed away, or mom, and passed away in war, that just throws a wrench in a family dynamic. That's one, but I can't pin it to one war specifically. I think just in general. So any other ideas on events in history?
I feel like the sexual revolution of the 60s, which was sort of off of the equal rights movement, but really pushed it to another extreme where we have these cultural shifts. Vietnam was part of it, because before Vietnam, it was a matter of honor and duty, but also pride to serve the nation and to go to war. And then we got to this next generation who were like, no, I'm not, I don't believe in the cause, so I'm no longer going to honor the institution of the army, or I don't know if I'm saying that quite right, but can you see what I mean? Where there was this cultural shift where it became more about what the individual felt like doing and what they wanted, versus the mindset before that, I feel like was more of a, we're all in this together for the good of the nation. And that in the 60s, early 70s, it became a divided, I mean, really it divided our nation with people saying, you know what, I don't agree with this such and such, so I no longer have to honor the role of the military, or that doesn't sound quite right. I'm not sure how to explain better what I mean with that, but I feel like there was a definite shift at that time period. And it was all sort of on the coattails of this equal rights and civil rights movement, which again, were all good things, but they were coupled with this undermining, like, selfish principles where everything became about the individual and what the individual wanted, regardless of the cost to society. And I feel like that just was like this tidal wave that brought all of the, it sort of deconstructed all the social norms and allowed people to start looking at not just the things that needed to be changed, but then, okay, what else do I want to throw in here that suits my, personal agenda, or that will help me be able to do whatever I want on the coattails of all these other issues that are going on.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're going with that, because I agree. I think I think probably family dynamics shifted, like you said, on the coattails of all these different revolutions, because as soon as you could have sex with someone that you weren't married with, then why get married? And as soon as you could say no to going to war, then why care about what anyone else wants you to do, or why care about the common good? And like you said, I don't wish I was there, but I wish I could see it happening to be right about this. But like you said, it was probably more of a collectivistic society before. And then as soon as people could start saying, well, this is what I want to do, it definitely became more individualistic, more self-driven, less about, increasing the common good, building families, going to war. I mean, yeah, that's what a lot of people see as building the common good. Okay, so does anyone else have a topic that they're dying to talk about before we summarize and do notes? Because there are so many good things this week. I don't want to deny anyone. So if the Spirit's telling you to talk about something, do so now.
Sorry, I know I've talked a lot. I just had one more thought that has just been pressing at me all week. And it was, every time that I read something or watched something, I kept picturing the armor of God and the sword of truth in particular. And I kept thinking, okay, so number one, we know who wins. This is a battle, and it feels like evil is winning right now because it's so prevalent. And if you didn't really know who wins, you would think that we don't win. However, I know that we win. And when I was thinking about the armor of God, and I was thinking about it with our children particularly, but I thought, you know what? It's not just for them. I need to put it on too. And one of the parts of the armor of God is the sword of truth. And what that sword of truth does, we learn about. It's a double-edged sword. Is it a double-edged sword? Actually, now that I say that, that sounds a little wrong. But there's something, I have to look at my notes really quick. But it divides asunder, and it so arming us with truth, that's part of this preparation process that we need the vocabulary, we need to be able to articulate. But when Ryan Anderson was speaking, I thought that is what he's doing. He is using the sword of truth right now, and he is explaining without it becoming this emotional debate. He is explaining using truth to be able to advocate for marriage and to, open our eyes. And so that image of carrying the sword of truth with me, I want my full body of armor on, I want my shield, I want my helmet. But sometimes I feel like I walk around and I've left my sword at home thinking I want to protect myself, but I don't really want to ruffle any feathers. And if people see me carrying a sword around, they're going to freak out type image. But I feel like it's time to pick up our swords of truth. It's time to arm ourselves with them. And that takes us learning this information and being ready to articulate it in a way that is spreading light and uplifting and building. But it's time to start carrying that sort of truth around with all of us. And we need to put one in our children's hands so that they have the tools that they need to not just protect themselves, when we're putting the armor on them too. And I was thinking about this when you had when you were talking about having your first baby earlier. Now I can't think of your name. When you were saying you're going to have your first baby. Anyway, I was thinking about this. We want to put their armor on them too, but we can't just send them out the door with their shield and the armor on their body. We have to put every piece on them to be able to really protect them. And that includes that sort of truth. And while we don't want them to run wild, swinging it at everything that's in their way, we do want them to be able to effectively use it so that they are protected, so that they have the tools to protect their family, and so that they are also in that role of spreading truth and being advocates for the family in the way that they can, appropriate for their ages. So for a 5-year-old, it might be to just help them understand that there's nothing wrong with having a big family. It's not, we teach them at those appropriate levels, but I thought it's time for all of us to put on the full armor of God, and that includes that sword.
Well said. I couldn't think of a better way to finish this conversation. So Jeannie, you took notes, right? Do you want to just summarize and then we can conclude?
Yep. Okay. So the summary of our lesson is the whole lesson. So we should just all go back and read it. Okay. So it seems like everybody was really inspired by Kelly Houghton. I'm going to say Houghton. And her example and her messages, the importance of defending light and not, what's the word? Defending light and not deconstructing darkness. Is that right? That seems like sort of the overarching thing is looking for light, teaching our children, influencing those around us, trying to find ways that we can be an instrument for the Lord. In like the example from Kelly with Costa Vida, and how we set the example as the culture continues to shift in standing strong and not being afraid. A couple of things that everybody I think mentioned from Ryan Anderson was his just ability to talk about what marriage is and the importance of it. The degree of the attack on the family was brought up several times. The way that it's gotten more significant, not as behind the scenes. It's sort of right in our face right now. And just the importance of knowing why we're standing for what we're standing for, and not being afraid to do so, to finding our courage so that we can be there to help others and to do what the Lord needs us to do. Did I catch everything? There was a lot. I have 2 full pages of notes.
You did awesome.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, so who's setting up next week? It's going to be about every other week because there's only 6 or 7 of us and there's 3 jobs.
Oh yeah.
So, is there anybody that hasn't set up a meeting yet?
I haven't.
Okay, Jamie, do you want to do it next week?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, who wants to take notes?
I didn't take notes.
Was that Tiara?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then who wants to be the discussion leader? Terry, are you in for discussion leader? You were discussion leader today.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it again, unless you or Valerie want to do
You
it.
did a week off. Well, I did the first meeting, so I guess it kind of comes around again. So I'll put myself in for it, but then if one of the Katies wants to do it, I'll hand it off to them.
Good thinking.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Talk to you guys next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.